Thank you, John. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm really excited to talk to you. This is the very first time that I am giving this talk, and my book published on 12/21/21, cool date, and it was also winter solstice. So let me just get to my slides. Okay. So this is the first time I'm actually talking about this book. So I'm really, really excited to talk about it today. And we're just going to kind of dive in. Basically, it's the accumulation of my personal story and my 20-something years in this industry, working with people, my academic training, my clinical training, everything kind of aggregated into this one book, into 5 chapters, because then there was all this room for, the recipes, the 75 recipes. But I'm excited to share this because it's a very personal journey to me, and that's actually where I wanted to begin. And I've never shared these photos before, so this is me circa 4 or 5 years old. My mom said that I danced before I walked. I loved dancing, and I grew up in a studio like this and, practicing my pirouettes and my rond de jambes and my pas de bourrées and all of those things. I loved dance more than anything. And, as I was growing up, getting to like maybe 10, 11 years old, I started, I was watching myself in the mirror, as we all do in dance class. And I was watching kind of my body start to change, as bodies do at that age. And one day around that time, my teacher called out from the end of the classroom, and she said, "Julieanna, it's time to cut out your snacks." And this was in front of all my friends and colleagues and everything. And it was like, I didn't realize it at the time, but this was kind of this very poignant moment that changed the whole trajectory of my entire life. It made me curious about, well, what does that mean, snacks? And what does that mean, body image and weight and diet and nutrition and how it affects your body? And granted, dance is kind of, it gravitates towards this world more than most worlds, but it was really significant for me. And it set me off on this journey to learn. I wanted to know everything there was about nutrition and diet. And I just started studying and reading. And at one point, I landed on this profound book by John Robbins called Diet for a New America. And it was the first time I learned about how food ended up on the plate. And I didn't want to contribute to that world anymore. As soon as I read it, it was like I was unseated. And I decided I wasn't going to eat animal products. I did not know what that meant. And there was no internet back then that I had access to. So I just decided to stop eating animals. And I was eating the side dishes my mom would make, or I would eat, granola bars and rice cakes and that kind of thing. And of course, my parents were worried about me, as good parents would be, because I wasn't eating what they thought I was supposed to be eating. And I write about this in my book, The Vegetarian Diet, because it was quite an interesting moment. I had what I refer to as an intervention. And my parents took me out to dinner with our friend Kendra, who's a nurse, and we went to a steakhouse, and they ordered me a teriyaki steak with a pineapple ring on top. And I just remember looking at that steak and thinking, once you know, you can't unknow. And I remember cutting into the steak, thinking about all that, while Kendra was telling me, you're going to be deficient in protein and iron and all this stuff. And she scared me properly into thinking I really do need to eat the steak. And it was a hard bite to swallow, but I did. And like most people, I went back to the norm of eating animals. But in my head, I kept thinking, the vegetarians aren't dropping out like flies. We're not hearing these stories of like mass vegetarian, incidents of illness. Like that just wasn't a thing. So I knew there was more to this story, and I kept reading and reading. Now, fast forward. I have never shared these photos. This is me acting. I was an actress because I grew up in LA, and a lot of people go into acting in LA. And I was really passionate about it. And I was traveling the world. You could see in the upper right corner, I was in Japan doing a play there. And I was doing a lot of Shakespeare, and I loved acting. And I was at an arts high school here in Los Angeles, kind of like Fame, but the LA version of it. So I was in the theater department doing all sorts of theater. And I eventually ended up with, an agent. My parents let me get an agent once I had a car. So I was driving around and auditioning and, for movies and TV and modeling things and music videos, stuff like that. And, it was really kind of a strange world too. But at one point, my manager said to me, Julieanna, you got to lose a few pounds. And, for camera. And you can see I was never like really overweight, but I wasn't like camera ready according to Hollywood standards. And so here we were back again. And so I was like, okay, I'm already exercising like crazy. I loved exercising my whole life. I loved that. But I got really into it after what happened in ballet class. And I was already eating healthy. So the manager said, here, I'm going to set you up with my trainer. She's great. Okay. So I went to this trainer and lo and behold, I found a new passion. I loved personal training. I'm like, this is perfect. I can do this while I'm, pursuing my acting career. And so while I was in college, or at the end of college, I was studying pre-med and theater. And I became a personal trainer, and it was great. I loved it. But then when I started personal training, when I finished school and actually really started working in it, people were asking me about nutrition. And I didn't want to just regurgitate the chapter on nutrition that I had read in my personal training handbook. I wanted to know why and what, and really understand nutrition, really go deep into it. And so I applied to grad school as, to become a registered dietitian and get my master's in nutrition. And I got in at Cal State Northridge, and it was the best time of my academic career ever. I hated school until this point because it was so interesting. I was learning about biochemistry and microbiology and physiology, medical nutrition therapy, statistics, all this amazing stuff. And these little kind of nuggets started to sneak in, like, all these recommendations to tell your patients they need 3 servings of dairy every single day. And then at the bottom, it would say sponsored by the Dairy Council. Or, I would go to the big conference and it was like this huge presence of the dairy industry and the fast food industry and all the industry. It was really interesting. And I also happened to look and see, oh, wait a second, you can get protein and iron in plants, and actually better sourced in plants. Like I started to see all this stuff kind of come together. So I finished graduate school, and then I had my daughter, who might make an appearance because today's the first day of spring break. So she's sleeping in, but she might pop in here any minute now. And after I had my daughter, I dove in. I went plant-based, and everything about my health changed. My acne that I struggled with my entire life, tried everything, was better. My lifelong sinus infections that just made me fall asleep in class because I had to take Benadryl all the time, like that finally improved. No more sinus infections. And I had them all the time. My GI, for everything, I felt better than ever. So as I was transitioning from student and personal trainer to mom and registered dietitian, I started implementing this with my clients. And that was it. That was unbelievable. Beyond anything I had learned in grad school about what to expect with the power of food and nutrition, I've seen all this stuff. So at this point now, I've worked with, I want to say hundreds of people directly one-on-one, and then thousands of people that I've interacted with through my audiences, through my books, through my TV shows, through social media, thousands and thousands of stories at this point after 17 years in this world. And I aggregated all of this and concentrated all of this into 5 chapters into this book. And this is the one that published on 12/21. So I'm going to summarize it here because I can't believe how much I learned. And I feel so excited. And I've watched so many people completely transform their lives and their relationship with food, their relationship to their body, because that's what's so important. That's where it all started for me. And I'm really excited to share this with you today. So the 3 components that I've put together, none of this is new. There's nothing here that you haven't heard before, I don't think, but I've put it together in a way that has evolved out of these conversations with my clients and evolved from what I understood to be true, and then what I saw to be true, and then all the science and everything in between. So it's a combination of 3 things. One, of course, is a whole food plant-based diet. Secondly is, this data on time-restricted eating is so exciting. And then here's where all of it happens. Like you could know everything about nutrition, but the mindfulness component, the behavioral component is enormous, enormous. We are tribal people. We want to connect and break bread with people. We are psychosocial beings living in this world, and it's so much more difficult than just what you know. So all of that is what I've evolved in my conversations and I shared in this book. And I'm going to give you a little bit of that today. I started a weight loss support group a couple of years ago, and I wanted to have here's what you need to do in a booklet. So I made this little e-booklet called The 10 Tenets to Sustainable Weight Loss, summarizing what does this look like? What is the plan? What is the program? And so here are the 10 tenets. We're going to go through all of them. So in the first chapter of the book is choose, find your purpose, choose your weight, determine your timeline. And then the second chapter is systematize, where we go into eating plants, learning to recognize hunger and satiety, don't break the seal, stop counting, set a schedule, monitor meal volume, and master monotony. So let's go through all of those. I realized the hard way that you can't convince someone to do this. There's no point. You have to want it. And the way I say that is that you could lead a human to healthy, but you can't make them eat. For the first few years, first of all, plant-based wasn't a big thing back then. They didn't say plant-based necessarily. So it was just starting to grow and expand. And my goodness, how has it expanded? It's extraordinary where we are today. But back then, I was trying to convince everyone I knew, you need to eat this way. It's amazing. Look at the science, look at the facts, look at the before and afters, and I was beating my head against the wall. And clients would come to me with something and I would try to convince them. And it was so stressful. And I was so disappointed because I want to be effective. I want to help people. That's why I'm doing what I do. I want to change people's lives. And I spent all this time trying to convince people, and it wasn't so efficacious. It just wasn't working as well as I wanted it to. And it wasn't until I finally had this aha moment where I was like, oh my gosh, forget it. I'm not going to convince anyone. I'm just going to be a lighthouse, not a tugboat, right? That's the expression. So I decided I will never try to convince anyone again. People always ask me, how do I convince so-and-so and such? You can't. I could only take care of myself. But if anyone comes to me, they want to make these changes, they want to transform their health, they want to lose the 10 pounds, the last 10 pounds or the 100 pounds that they've been carrying around for a long time that they're struggling with, I will love you all the way through. And I love my clients, and we have such an incredible deep dive relationship. We get so close going through this journey because it's so deeply personal, but I can't convince them. And I was really hit over the head with this lesson last year. I shared this in my talk last week or a week and a half ago, where my father, or I guess it was in the panel, my father had a stroke about a year ago. He's always kind of laughed at me and what I do, my crazy diet and my crazy whatever. He's heard me speak. He says he's read my books. I don't know how much he's done of all that, but he just kind of chuckles. And, he has no interest whatsoever in changing his diet. And he had a stroke last year. And when he finally was conscious enough, we were on FaceTime because he was out of the country and I couldn't get there because of COVID and my passport and blah, blah, blah. And we got onto a FaceTime and I said, Dad, what's going on? And he said, my diet was just not so good while I was here. I'm like, okay, well, I could help you with that. And he looked at me and he goes, Jewel, you have to want it. And that was it. He was right. He had no interest in it. And then his doctor corroborated that and, said to him, oh, just don't drink alcohol or caffeine and don't worry about your diet. It doesn't matter. So he got all the words he wanted and he moved on with his life. And the other night he had chicken Parmesan when we went out to dinner. Sorry, Dad, for throwing out the bus. But anyway, I just realized, you know what, no matter what, even the people you love the most, and people ask me every day, how do I convince my dad or my son or my friend or my husband or my whatever? And you can't, you have to want it. So the first thing I have my clients do is define their purpose. Why do you want it? What does it look like to you to be at this place where you are in the driver's seat? You know exactly what to eat, why you're eating it, when you eat, your whole psychology, you know how to deal in social situations. What does that look like for you? And for some people, it's as important or deep because there's no judgment here ever. It's, as I want to be there for my grandchildren, or there's people that I just want to look good in my bathing suit this summer. All of it is great. It doesn't matter what drives you. You have to want it. That did that on itself. So I have them write out their why. And there's something very powerful about putting ideas from your head into words and into writing. So I recommend they actually write down their why, and they could always edit and add and change, but they could refer to it. And a lot of my clients have a lot of results from when they're in a moment where they're being tempted, because you're always going to have those, where they'll look at their why and that's what stops them. So it's an accountability thing too. It's visualizing it, it's putting into reality. So it's important to know why you're doing that. So that's the first step. The second step is choose your weight. Now that might sound interesting, like choose your weight, but yeah, this is all about choosing. That's what Choose You Now is about. You get to choose your weight. When my dance teacher told me I needed to lose weight and my manager told me to lose weight, that was them putting that on me, but it's my body overall, right? I get to make that decision. And so I want to empower my clients to choose. You get to choose, and here are the tools to choose. And we could always, change all of that. It's malleable. It's definitely, you have control over this. So I'll talk about this in the next slide, but I use the Hamwe formula to determine an ideal body weight range based on just statistics and averages of what's healthy. And it's a big wide range. We'll talk about that in a second. And then I'd have them determine their timeline. My clients lose 0.4 to 0.8 pounds a day of body fat, predictably so, if they want. That's max speed ahead. And then you can go slower if you want to incorporate or maintain a healthy exercise routine because you don't want to let go of that for a period of time. That's fine too. It just goes a little bit slower. So we determine the timeline based on my client's goals. So this formula, the Hamwe formula, it's a basic formula. Most people use this as a reference. And basically it uses gender and height as the determining factors. So for men, they get about 106 pounds for 5 feet, then 6 pounds per inch after that. And for women, it's 100 pounds for 5 feet and then 5 pounds per inch after that. So I'm about 5'4". I'm going to round up a little. So about 120. And that's like a 108 plus or minus 10%, 108 to 132, something like that. So that's a big wide range. And then I have my clients say, okay, so once you get into that range, because I don't want to encourage anyone to go lower, of course, but in that range, where do you feel the best? How do you feel in your clothing at this size? And how do you feel, with your exercise? And is this a weight that's easy to maintain? So we kind of play with all those numbers as we get towards those numbers and get into those. So it's something that we just use as a reference. I also use a scale. A lot of dietitians are anti-scale and a lot of people are afraid of the scale. But if we could uncouple a scale from any kind of judgment, it's just data. We need data. We have to have information. And the scale isn't looking up at you and saying, oh, you've been hitting the cookies. The scale has no judgment. It's just information for you. And if you could uncouple that from the emotional thing about it, it will help you because then you have a tool. Other tools I use are measurements. My thing is moving on its own. How is it doing that? Maybe it's using pre-recorded rehearsal times or something. Anyway, measuring yourself at different points, the same points, maybe once a month or twice a month, depending on how quickly you're going, that's helpful too. And then your clothing, of course, it's going to adjust as you move down. But, remember that we don't see ourselves in 3 dimensions, and this body dysmorphia thing is very real. We don't see ourselves. We don't really see ourselves the way other people see us. And it's really interesting. I deal a lot with that with my clients, and it's hard to understand. But like when you look at a photo and you think you're seeing a certain version of yourself, it's not necessarily as accurate as it may be to someone else. So we don't really see ourselves in that way. And so that's why using these tools is kind of helpful, just to have some more objective forms of measurement. And then I love the food journal. So food journal is a great tool for everyone, no matter what you're doing, because it helps with accountability. You have to write it. If you're going to take a bite, you got to write it down. It helps with, you're basically making a historical reference. So if you want to go back and see what was working, what wasn't working, you could always have a food journal. I do this with all my clients. I also work with people that are trying to determine their food allergies and people that are trying to recover from an illness, all of those things. And a food journal helps with symptoms and to assess, and to put things together. Because how many of you remember what you had for breakfast yesterday? Not everyone remembers, so it's having it documented, when that symptom happened, what your weight was, all of those things. The more information you have, the more data you have, the better you can make an assessment and a plan. I always tell my clients, I want you to have a PhD in weight loss in your body when you're done with me. And then we're going to get another PhD in weight loss maintenance or healthy weight maintenance, because it's a whole other world. And they're both so important, because the subtitle of my book is Lose Weight for the Last Time. The reason for that is how many of you have been on this diet roller coaster? So many people have been on this diet roller coaster, whether it's 10 pounds or 100 pounds. So many people come to me, they've lost and gained throughout their life. That's why the most important part of this is maintenance, is when you hit that low weight, that goal weight, that's when the diet actually begins. And we'll talk about that later. So food journal, very helpful. And then determining your timeline just has to do with how quickly you want to rip off the Band-Aid, or do you want to go a little slower? I work with all sorts of people. It depends on where they are in their life and what's going on. So you can do either way. All right, so the second chapter, we're talking about systematizing. You need a system in place to make this happen. So here are the different components in the systematized category. Of course, we're going to start with eating plants. You could lose weight all sorts of ways, right? There's the keto diet, there's an Atkins diet, there's a paleo diet, there's drugs, there's all sorts of ways to lose weight. They're not all equally healthy. And I see in the literature that the healthiest way to lose weight, of course, is with a plant-based diet. Here are some of the side effects of eating plants. A whole food plant-based diet is the only diet associated with like a complete reversal of advanced stage cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. More evidence came out this week as well. There's just always new research on this extraordinary advantage. It's also associated with lower body mass index and body fat, lower overall mortality and mortality from ischemic heart disease, reduced medication requirements. I'm telling you, in graduate school nutrition, and I sat in on my ex-husband's medical school, and I've worked with lots of doctors, and I know in medical school too, we are taught to try to slow down the progression of disease, to try to minimize having to increase the dose of medications. Rather than that, my clients get off their medications. In fact, when I'm starting with a client who's on specifically a high blood pressure med or a high blood sugar med, I have them alert their physician ahead of time and say, look, I'm going on a really radical program. I'm going to lose weight really quickly. I'm going to have to monitor my medications really closely because blood pressure will drop really quickly. I had a student in my class this year that actually got off of, he was 30 years on, I think 2 or 3 different high blood pressure meds. In a week, he got off of all of them. This is like, results are typical. It's unbelievable. This is not what I learned in school was possible, but I see it every single day. It's so extraordinary. Plant-based diets also associated, of course, with sustainable weight management, with a reduced incidence of hypertension, hyperlipidemia, hyperglycemia, reduced risk of certain cancers a lot more multifactorial, of course, reduced inflammatory markers from obesity. You reduce your obesity, all those cascades, these hormonal cascades that take place, and all this lipotoxicity and all the stuff that happens from having the excessive fat, which is what is associated with these chronic diseases and why it's important to maintain a healthy weight. There's a lot of health risks of obesity. So this reduces those inflammatory markers as well. So I always say a plant-based diet supports living longer, health span, not just living longer, lifespan. What does a plant-based diet look like? This. I want you to eat a diet of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices in infinite tasty combinations. There's so many wonderful ways to eat plants. And even if you're on weight loss mode, which is not fun, I will tell you right now, it's not fun. We have to go through a period of a little bit of a deficit. That there's no way around that. But in that time, you don't have to suffer. You get to enjoy delicious cuisine. You get to enjoy your meals. It's really, really a win-win situation. And you get more satiety on a plant-based diet. One of the perks of doing it with plants. I prioritize these foods into this mnemonic called the 6 daily threes. And if you were here with me last week for my other talk on food as medicine, we talked about the 6 daily threes. If you go to my website, plantbaseddietitian.com, this is there expounded upon. It's in my book. It's everywhere. So the 6 daily threes, basically, these are 6 food groups that I recommend prioritizing. So especially when you are on weight loss mode and you have to have a deficit, there's limited landscape, or there's limited amount of real estate for what you're eating in a day. So you want to prioritize the foods that are the most nutritionally dense and that have things that are nutritionally unique. So these are the 6 categories. I also implement this with maintenance and lifelong healthy eating. These are foods to prioritize. So there's reasons for that. Each category here offers a wide range of nutrients that you can't really get elsewhere. And so they're really important to consider. Now, you don't have to do anything perfect. You don't have to do all 3 servings every day. I don't think there is a such thing as a 100% RDI diet. There's no way anyone can eat perfectly. And I don't think that should ever be the goal. I think perfection has been an obstacle for so many people. And I try to just get rid of that whole concept. So here's a way to just think about it, just to look at your plate and try to make sure you're getting these on a regular basis. The first group is the cruciferous and leafy green vegetable category. That's why I sign off on my podcast with leafy green love and all my social media with leafy green love. I sign all my books with a leafy green marker. Leafy greens are amazing. And, they have all these phytonutrients in there that are very unique, that are extremely powerful anti-inflammatories, antioxidants, antimicrobials. They are cardioprotective. They reduce risk for cancer. They have all of the benefits and the most nutritional bang for your caloric buck, I would say, for fruits and vegetables. By the way, everyone agrees about fruits and vegetables. The American Institute for Cancer Research, Harvard, the USDA, everyone says half your plate should be fruits and vegetables. Half your diet should be fruits and vegetables. So especially make sure you're getting the leafy greens, and you're also getting the other colored vegetables too. They have their own other category. This is the reds and oranges and yellows. You get all the carotenoids, the whites, the allium family, like the leeks and onions and garlic, so extraordinarily healthy. So, eating a rainbow every day, that's a great way to think about it. Just, are you getting all the colors? I always look at my plate and say, oh, do I have all the colors? What am I missing? I'll make sure I get that in the next meal, right? Just so you're getting a wider range. All those colors themselves, the pigments themselves, represent a class of nutrients. So exciting. It's so beautiful. Mother Nature is so beautiful. And then fruits, of course, fruits are extraordinarily helpful too. The servings are about a cup. With the greens, there's so much that they just go from enormous amounts to tiny amounts when they're cooked. So it's about half a cup cooked or a cup raw. And so same with the vegetables, and for fruits, about a cup or one medium piece. And then there's a lovely legumes. So this is all lentils, all the beans. Hummus should be a food group. The tofu, soy products, and tempeh, edamame, those products as well count in this category. So healthy, so full of these wonderful essential amino acids, different types of fiber that are so good for our gut microbiome. They're really, really important. And so recommending about 1 to 1.5 cups of those a day. And then the nuts and seeds, we need some fats in our diet. I think I'll talk about that now. Like, we need 1 to 2 ounces of nuts and seeds a day which is also like 30 to 40 grams. And all the nuts and seeds, there's an abundance of evidence in the literature that nuts and seeds are, helpful cardio-metabolically, and they're really helpful for weight loss and weight maintenance and a lot of other reasons. And there's all these wonderful, unique nutrients in nuts and seeds, like ellagic acid and L-arginine, and and some of the nuts and seeds have different unique properties, like almonds have a lot of calcium, and Brazil nuts have a lot of selenium, and the hemp seed, chia seed, flaxseed walnuts have a lot of omega-3s. So mix and match. When I make my dressings, which I'm doing a dressings and sauces class this week. I always use a nut and seed. I mix them all up, and then I blend them together with all these flavors and make a delicious dressing or sauce. And that's how I deal with it with my clients that have the tendency to overeat nuts and seeds, because nuts and seeds are no longer packaged in their natural container. And so we could just grab in a bag and get a whole handful of them and eat them way too easily. So a lot of people have that issue, especially with weight loss. So I have my clients kind of blend them up into sauces and dressings. And it also, the added benefit is that when you pour that over vegetables, you're going to absorb the fat soluble nutrients in those vegetables because of the fat in there. So it's kind of a win-win situation. I don't recommend avoiding fat for 2 reasons. There's a lot of people that say just no fat and you can eat as much as you want. And that perpetuates 2 problems that I've seen and worked with my clients over the years with. One is something I call dietary fat phobia, and it's a fear of fat. And fat is important. We need a little bit of fat in our diet every day. The best place to get them is nuts and seeds. And, some avocado is okay, and some tofu is okay. Those things are really healthy, but especially nuts and seeds. But we need some essential fats, and that's why I always say nuts and seeds. And then the other second component that avoiding fat does is, because the idea of I could eat as much as I want if I don't have fat, it perpetuates a binge purge cycle that I work with a lot of my clients to heal from that. So the idea is not to get as full as you can and stuff yourself as full as you can with low fat. The idea is to eat a balanced diet and to not crave or be comfortable with that extra full feeling. It's to get comfortable with eating enough food and a well-balanced diet. And you still get plenty of satiety by eating a lower fat, but some fat diet. And it's important for long-term health. The last group on the 6 daily threes are mushrooms. And I recently added this to this about a year ago, because I used to have this as movement and exercise. And that's, of course, important on a regular basis to move more. But mushrooms called out to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I learned so much about mushrooms. They are incredible for your immune function, which is so important, especially now, but always, but especially now we're talking about immunity. And they're so amazing. They're magical mushrooms. They're like interconnected under the earth, and they communicate together. There's all these incredible things about mushrooms that I encourage you to explore. But the ongoing kind of recommendation that I've learned is 3 servings or 3 different species a week. Try to incorporate those. I try to get 3 servings a day because I love them so much. And they're so great culinarily speaking. They're just so much fun and magic about mushrooms. Okay. I cannot even begin to tell you how many clients of mine where I'll say, we go within. So I'm going to talk soon about not counting. And I'm like the anti-dietitian because most dietitians were trained to count, calculate, measure, weigh. And I don't have my clients do that. I want to go within. This is the mindfulness piece. This is like listening to your body. So I've spent my whole life studying naturally lean people ever since my dance teacher said that to me. I was married to a naturally lean person for many, many years. My best friend is one of those. I actually did a video on this. I'm happy to share like the 5 habits of naturally lean people, because I'm not naturally lean. I have to think about it and work on it all the time. And so I've employed these ideas, these habits that I've noticed and studied over these years into I've made them tools for me to practice, even though it's not natural for me. One of those is learning hunger satiety. So naturally lean person will be like, oh, I ate a lot last night and I'm just not that hungry today, so I'm just going to eat less. And they don't think about that consciously necessarily. It's just natural. It's just like they just don't eat as much. So it's interesting because I'm like, oh, it's time to eat. It's time to eat. You learn all these habits. We're socialized. Everything about food is habit. Everything about food is habit. And we are so social, and we are socialized in all these interesting, intricate things. It's really interesting. So learning to recognize hunger and satiety has been one of the things I spend the most time with clients on. Most people are like, I don't know when I'm truly hungry. I don't know when I'm actually full. And I find this very fascinating. So this is just an idea. I don't really love this scale, but I don't have a specific one, but think about it. If you're at like a 1 or a 0, let's say I use 0 sometimes, it's like empty, like you haven't eaten for day or days or whatever. You're really, really hungry. And we'll talk about that in a second. I use a celery stick test for that. And then a 10 would be after a huge holiday feast, and then you have one more serving of dessert. And then it's like, ugh, you're so full. And so the celery stick test is the hungrier you are, the more everything sounds delicious. Like I love celery. It's great, but it's not the first thing I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about food. It's not like, ooh, I want some celery. But if I haven't eaten, I'm really super hungry, the celery starts to sound crunchy and watery. And I start to my mouth starts to water when I think about celery. So that works. Like if you know that you're as hungry, like if you can't tell what hunger is at first, use that test. Say, am I hungry enough for celery stick? And the opposite, I always think about my grandma. She was so cute. We would be at breakfast and she'd be talking about lunch. And then at lunch, she's like, what are we going to have for dinner? I'm like, Grandma, we'll just talk about this later. Like, I didn't want to think about food. Like when you're eating, you don't want to think about the next meal. You're just eating that meal. So it's really helpful to be hungrier to make those decisions. And that's kind of a way to think about, am I actually hungry? It's one way to think about it. I love the way, I think Dr. Furman's coming up after this. But I love the way he talks about toxic hunger. He posted this on my blog many, many years ago. And I love his idea about toxic hunger. Many of us think of hunger as being hangry, or the headaches, or the fatigue, or there's all these symptoms that people think as hunger. But if you think about it from an anthropological standpoint, if you're hungry, you better be ready to hunt and gather. You got to get food. Otherwise, you're not going to survive. So it's a survival adaptation to have energy and feel good, even if you're hungry. So it's not like you're going to be fatigued and, oh, I can't move and I've got headaches. And so what Dr. Furman says is it's more of a detoxification symptom. Those symptoms, the shakiness, the headaches, the hangriness, is a detoxification symptom of a poor diet. So if you're on a really super healthy diet, you won't experience those symptoms. And I'll tell you this, we're going to talk about circadian clocks and everything. You will know, your body is like, okay, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. And your body will know, like if you eat at the same time every day, our circadian clocks are so brilliant that we will tie into that. So if you're feeling anything else off of that, it's because of maybe having something that was off plan, or because you're transitioning from a standard Western diet. This is what I see very commonly in my clients. So that's what I use with my clients as practice. The other part of that is satiety. This to me is the hardest thing in the world. And my clients, we spend so much time on this because I don't have an off switch. I love to eat. Obviously, look at my life is food. I talk about food all day long. I love food. I love to cook. I love to eat. I love to socialize with food. I'm like most people, I love to eat. And so it's hard for me to stop. And I've studied the behavior about this and the psychology about this. Like, once you're eating, you've got the hand to mouth thing and it tastes really good. It's hard to stop. And to know what is a 4 or 5, can I stop now? So I've employed these techniques of my naturally lean friends, and I try. This is what works for me, and my clients have been helped by this technique also. I will stop that when I think I could still eat a lot more, and I put it to the side and I distract myself. You just need to create 1 minute of space. Remember, mindfulness is being in the moment and having space and just creating a moment of space and awareness. So I will move my food away from in front of me and I will distract myself. If I'm not with someone, I will, I'll just go and do one more email or respond to a text or check my Instagram real quick. And then I say, okay, can I be done now? And I really kind of tune in. I'm like, wow, because sometimes it takes a little bit for the stomach to tell the brain that you're full, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's what happens. So then it's like, what, I could now. And then sometimes I have to tell myself, I'll eat more if I get hungry, just to quell my brain. And that really helps me learn. And then I have my clients practicing, okay, did you stop at a 4 or a 5 or a 6? What number were you at? And then we'll start recording this. So you start to learn. We're learning our bodies because we have been socialized out of our body. We eat because it's breakfast time, it's lunchtime. We eat because we're all eating, or we're eating because we're at the movies and everyone's having popcorn. We eat because it's, this holiday and we're supposed to eat this, that, and the other. We're eating because of every other reason rather than, are you hungry? And when I ask my clients, are you really hungry in the morning? And most of them say, no, not really, but I thought that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Well, that's all marketing and it's all socialization. And none of that is really true. You need to eat when you're hungry and not any other time. And you need to stop when you feel satisfied because your body will naturally gravitate towards its healthy weight if you do that. But it takes practice. It takes so much practice again and again and again and again and again. And everything about that is practice. And we will talk about that. And then there is the concept of breaking the seal. And we're going to talk about that next. So don't break the seal. I always thought about this, but then I had a client, a student in Thailand that he joined us in Thailand. He said this concept to me and it just summed it up brilliantly. Don't break the seal. So like last night, for instance, my daughter was eating this curry that smelled amazing and it looked amazing. She's like, Mom, don't you want some? Don't you want some? And I wasn't hungry. I was not hungry. So I didn't need to eat. And I know that if I had one bite, that wouldn't have been the end of it. So I know that if I say, I'll just have one bite, it's never that. You're breaking the seal. It's like, oh, I'm going to have one bite. Oh, that tasted so good. It lights up your brain. So I'm going to have more and more and more. And I know I have certain foods that I can't break the seal on. Like if I have one piece of vegan pizza, I'm going to want to have the whole vegan pizza. There's certain things that will stimulate that breaking of the seal for me. So know thyself and know that if it's not on your plan to eat this time or this meal, don't break the seal. That you don't say I could just have one bite because we are human after all. And that one bite will lead to usually a cascade. So keep calm. Don't break the seal. Okay, and back to this counting idea. So I do not count, calculate, measure, weigh. There's no calorie counting. There's no macronutrient counting, macro ratios. We're going to talk about that. How many of you have been counting calories and counting all that? It is almost impossible to be super accurate, right? We don't really have the tools to, unless we're weighing and then sticking them in a calorimeter and really getting an accurate measurement, we're guesstimating. Fine, that's fine. But it leads to so much frustration for people. And again, if we can talk about food and look at the mindfulness and eating when you're hungry and stopping when you feel just satisfied, that's really helpful rather than having to try to micromanage everything with calculations. I find so many people are frustrated with this and it's not very helpful. So even though some of my clients try to sneak in some calorie counting, it never seems to make sense when we do the accounting and we look at the rate of loss. why it doesn't always make sense. So we also don't know exactly how much we're burning. These movements, these twitches, whatever you do throughout the day, those add up too. But can we really calculate the numbers that you see when you go on the treadmill and it tells you how many calories you're burning? Not accurate. These things are not really exactly accurate. You'd have to be full on exactly measuring, and you don't need to. The good news is you don't need to, and it'll save you so much stress from not doing that. I'm very passionate about changing this conversation about macros. This has become such an ordeal. Like, you guys hear about it all the time. Oh, I'm counting my macros. And clients reach out to me, or potential clients reach out to me every day asking if I will tell them a plan to meet their macro needs. And absolutely not. I will not do that. I refuse. It's ridiculous. There is no ideal ratio. The reason there's so much divisiveness and discrepancies and conflict about this is because there is no magic number. Look at the Okinawan diet, very low fat diet, one of the healthiest diets ever recorded, right? Just the healthiest population, one of the top, and very low fat. But then you look at the Mediterranean diet, also known as the best world's best diet every year. They always say that. Very high fat diet. And then everything in between. The raw food diet could be very healthy, and it could be a high fat one with doing a lot of nuts and seeds and avocado and all that. And there's the low fat fruitarian raw people that are very low fat, and they also can be healthy too. So it's just, there's no ideal ratio. There's no reason to sit here and macro confuse ourselves. And, here's a little image, this little chart I did this is from Choosing Now Diet. It's in the book. And I compared, for example, 100 grams of baked potato, white potato, to 100 grams of a donut. And they've got about the same carbohydrate. I can't read this. I'm having a birthday on Monday, and my reading is the first thing that is gone. So about the same amount of carbohydrate, but look at the difference, like 32 grams of sugar versus 1 gram of sugar, 0.1 grams of fat versus 20 grams of fat. Our bodies don't recognize a baked potato in the same way it recognizes a donut. It goes in the body, and completely different metabolism. All sorts of different things happen. It's stored differently, it acts differently, it responds differently to our blood sugars and all of that. So the idea that we're comparing this is what they look at when they're doing these studies, right? They're looking at just carbohydrate. They're linking stuff together like refined sugar and a bean. But a starch and a fiber is very, very different than a refined sugar. Very, very different. So we need to get that conversation back to food. What is a carb? You could call chitin of crab shells carb. Paper is a carbohydrate. These are biochemistry terms that we used to describe things way back when. And it's just been I would say, devolved into this conversation that is so meaningless that it's confusing even healthcare professionals and researchers. The penultimate example of this that I always refer to is a 2018 Lancet journal. And by the way, this happens all the time, but this was like, when I saw this, I'm like, this is so ridiculous. The conclusion was both a high carbohydrate and a low carbohydrate diet increase mortality. What do you even do with that information? What do you do? Do you do a low carb, high carb? What's a moderate carb? So if I tell my clients, make sure you're eating a moderate carb, low glycemic, high protein, moderate fat diet, what does that even look like? Well, how do you translate that into reality? Well, most people are having a really hard time with it. And so let's just ditch that. Let's bring that conversation back to food. We know what a vegetable is. We know what a fruit is. We know what a whole grain, a legume, a mushroom, a nut, a seed, an herb, and a spice is. Let's talk about food. Let's talk about food groups. Let's bring the conversation back to something that we can relate to. All right, let's talk about schedule. The information on time-restricted eating has been so mind-blowing for me that I have to talk about it. I have to employ it. If someone told me, 10 years ago that I would be eating once a day and loving it, sometimes twice a day, but I prefer once a day and I feel so much better, I would think that was insane because I was a personal trainer. I was eating 6 meals a day. I was eating 18 egg whites and, veggies and chicken breasts. Like, so much has evolved since then. But the idea that I feel best on 1 to 2 meals a day, and not just me, all of my clients that are like, I could never do that, they all appreciate and love it after time. So we'll talk about that. But the data on time restricted eating is extraordinary, not just for weight loss necessarily, but for health span, for lifespan. Like the evidence that keeps growing is obviously it's just emerging. We've had data on fasting for however long, for so many, like hundreds of years. Like they've been fasting since Hippocrates, right? And the information is so fascinating. One way to employ all of the benefits of fasting on a regular basis, and I would say a less painful basis, because you don't have to go weeks or days or weeks without eating, is to do it on a regular basis where you're just giving yourself some time in the fasted state. So here's an example. This is from my last book, Health Span Solution. Every time you eat, from that last bite, it takes about 4 to 6 hours to finish the digestion, the metabolism, the absorption, all the stuff, the cascade of beautiful events and chemicals and hormones and everything that gets released in our bodies, this whole process that takes place. Really important, obviously, we need fuel, but it's very labor intensive. So all of our blood shunts to most of our blood shunts to our GI tract. A lot of energy goes to the GI tract, and it's, takes away from other things. So when we're in the fasted state, our bodies get to do all sorts of things: autophagy, metabolic house cleaning, getting rid of cancer cells and getting rid of, virus cells and fighting off this and strengthening this, and rejuvenation, refreshment, all these things that need to take place sometime. So if we give ourselves more time in that fasted state, it's really healthy. Like we give ourselves time to all those other things that we need to do. So think about what we mostly do now. Look at what we all like, the current way of eating is. We wake up, we have our coffee with our creamer and sugar. Boom, you're in the fed state. And then we have our breakfast. And then by the time we're still in the middle of this curve here, oh, it's time for lunch. And then we're having our lunch. And then by the time we're starting to come down from that, oh, time for a snack, time for dinner. We never get into that baseline fasted state. And then we eat before our little nighttime snack while we're watching a movie, and then time for bed. So then you still need 4 to 6 hours from the last bite to finish that process where you can start to benefit from sleeping. And by the way, the sleep is so important for your cognition, your memory, and all of that. If you're in the fed state, it's taking away from that process. So it's amazing what you can do with just limiting your time. Try and go into a limited window of eating. And usually that's a 4 to 6 hour window, but the evidence is kind of still like you could do 12 hours and still be better. I think it's compared to what? I always say compared to what is the question not asked often enough. Everything is compared to what. So that's what, when you look at the research, it's just what were they doing before? But I like to do a 4 to 6 hour window, and it seems to be very effective and very doable for my clients, very comfortable. And you have from the first bite to the last bite, 4 to 6 hours. You could plan it accordingly. Like if you like to eat with my clients that love to eat dinner with their families. So we have the first meal a little bit later. Most people aren't hungry first thing in the morning, but those people that are really hungry in the morning, that's even better. There's a little bit of advantage to shifting your calories earlier. But either way, there's still advantages. So then you would have your meal earlier and then stop late earlier. It's an amazing thing to play with. And the body is so extraordinary. We are so gorgeously tied to nature. We've got these circadian patterns that are, a daily cycle. And we've got a nightly, monthly cycle and annual, all these seasonal cycles. It's so gorgeous the way our bodies are. Our bodies are so magnificent. We don't even give it credit for all the stuff it could do. We try to micromanage everything, and we really don't need to. But this chart is from the Health Span Solution also. And it just shows like all the amazing things that happen. Like everything about food is habit, but our bodies are on a clock. Okay. So we wake up because our cortisol levels go up, we warm up. And so boom, we're up and ready to go for the day. You shoot your eyesight, you get some bright sunlight into your eyes. And that's really good for your suprachiasmatic nucleus to get that all stimulated and, to get back to stay on that pattern. If that's why seasonal affective disorder is a problem when you don't get the sun first thing in the morning or at all throughout the day, depending on where you live. But that's really important. And then you see all these different things that happen. And then at nighttime, our melatonin kicks in, we cool off and we're able to slip into slumber, and then we repeat. So all these there's a million other things that I'm omitting because for purposes of time and for aproposness, it's just amazing. So my point is that if you eat at the same time every day, let's say like for me, as soon as we work right now is my time of day. So I'm getting a little hungry, but that's okay. When I'm done here, I'm going to be having my big meal of the day. So if you eat at the same time every day, like my body knows it's time to eat. It's time to eat. This is 11 o'clock. I eat. It's 11 o'clock. I'm in Los Angeles. And your body will get used to it. And all of my clients are like, oh, I can never do this. They all say the same thing. Everyone that tries it and sticks to the same time every day, their body's like, oh, like right now it's 10:57 or whatever. I just looked at 10:57. My body's like, it's time to eat. So your body gets used to it, and it's really comfortable, and it gets really familiar and predictable and easy. It's really neat. And then there's volume. So what you're doing is you're getting on this, my clients, and if you want to try this, you're getting on the scale every morning. You are eating in this window, usually 2 times a day. You pick those times. And then if the scale is not going down for a few days, it's probably you're eating too much. Because again, you have to create a deficit. How do we maximize this whole idea? Calorie density. One of the perks of a plant-based diet. Plants are full of fiber. In fact, the only way you get fiber, the only form of fiber in food, plants. So the great thing about a plant-based diet, another one of the perks of losing weight with a plant-based diet, and for all the other reasons, is that you're getting the most nutritional bang for your caloric buck. You're getting that satiety. So you're not hungry all the time because of all that fiber in these foods. So you could utilize caloric density to your advantage to stay satiated. And, with satiation and satiety, they're 2 different things, the immediate effect and how long it lasts. Those are 2 things. So eating whole plants is ideal. And so I kind of broke this down into another graphic a few years ago. I need my glasses again. The calorie and nutrient density of food changes with the processing, right? So every derivation away from the original, we're getting rid of fiber, we're getting rid of some of the nutrition, and so we're going to get less satiety. So you want to stick to the intact versions of this, the most minimally processed foods of all. Now you could argue that you chop into a carrot and it's processed, people get extreme, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about like going from grapes to a raisin, right? Where you're getting rid of the water and dehydrating it, or to the grape juice where you're getting rid of the fiber and you're just taking out the juice. You want to stick to the wholest version possible, which is why I don't have my clients consuming oils, pure fat. Totally, you saw the caloric density. It is like you don't get any satiety from it. You remove all the fiber and most of the nutrition from it. You don't need oil. I also have my clients cut out flour during this time because flour is concentrated, it's refined, and it's easier to eat more of it, and it's less satisfying, less satiation for more calorie. That's a lose-lose situation. So during the weight loss process, overall, generally speaking, it's healthier to stick to as whole as possible. And so in my book, I sum this up with this. I got a little delay, kind of pause. I don't know if you guys see it yet. Now it's going to skip forward. Okay. Here, how to use the caloric density kind of idea in weight loss are these 4 things. So volumize. So you're plumping up the meals with more veggies, fruits, and mushrooms because they're so low in calories. So like in the book, I have a coleslaw potato salad. So it's like a lot of vegetable and very lower calorie. We have a nice delicious dressing on top, or the tempeh Reuben salad with rye potato croutons and Russian dressing, which is so fabulous, but it's very veggie heavy, or the mushroom cabbage cups where it's very veggie mushroom heavy. So that's one way to think about it. You could put your meal on a bed of greens over a salad with a light vegetable soup, just so you're plumping up your meals, you're volumizing that fiber. The other step is maximizing. So you're making the foods with the low calorie density the main attraction. So in the books, stuff like my spaghetti squash lasagna, or the peanut butter vegetable curry, or the Tex-Mex stuffed peppers with cheesy sauce, which is what I'm having for lunch as soon as we hang up from here. But making those vegetable heavy dishes and mushroom heavy dishes the main attraction, like stuffed mushrooms. Like there's so many ways to do it, and it's delicious and it's satisfying. And then you're just getting lower calorie because again, we have to create a deficit. And prioritize. So you're minimizing the foods with a high calorie density. So that would be stuff like, the nuts and seeds, you're limiting 1 or 2 ounces a day, 30 to 40 grams a day. And then, tofu, avocado, once in a while, those can fit in, absolutely. But you're minimizing those because those are a little bit more nutritionally or calorically dense. That's just a way to think about it. And then, of course, recognizing. So because of this caloric density, you should start to feel the hunger satiety even more, and just like practicing, get to know your body, really tune into your body. You'll be amazed what it'll tell you if you really, really pay attention and try to just get away from all the noise. There's a lot of noise out there. Protein. Eat 3 meals a day, 6 meals a day, keep your metabolism on fire, all that stuff. Breakfast, lunch, just try to get away from that and go, am I hungry? Am I satiated? And use that in terms of guiding yourself. And then monotony. Most of us are creatures of habit. Most of us eat the same, like maybe 1 or 2 breakfasts, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 lunches, maybe 5 or 6 dinners in a week, rotation wise. Most of us have a repertoire of about 10 recipes, which is what I always say. Like I talked about this in my last talk about if you want to switch to a plant-based diet, all you need are your 10 new favorite plant-based recipes. That's it. That's so feasible and doable. It's not a big obstacle to come up with 10 recipes. So with the weight loss process, if you're not making all these crazy food decisions and you're not, having lots of variety where it's exciting and it tastes even better, so you're just, I'm going to have a couple extra bites where it adds up really quickly, this is a really helpful tool for weight loss. So interestingly, have you heard this fact? We make about 200 food decisions a day. What am I going to eat? What am I going to eat? Oh, those M&Ms look really good on my colleague's table at my desk over there. Oh, my daughter's eating curry. That looks really good. I want a bite. Should I have a bite? What do I have for lunch? What do I have for dinner? Oh, I wish I didn't eat that. All of those thoughts, about 200 a day. It's insane if you think about how much space we use in our brain to think about this. In fact, I've cleared up space with my club. We clear up space. Like, what else do you want to do with your life? If you could save all this time not making decisions, what else would you do with your time? And I'm not kidding. I've had clients finish their PhD dissertations, learn a new language, start a new instrument, read all these books, clean up their house. I think of all these things that people have done because they're not planning food. They're not thinking about food. They're not eating food all day long. They're not cleaning up and preparing, and all the time that we spend making and thinking and doing about food and all the guilt and shame that so many people struggle with. I don't know if all of you can relate to that, but a lot of us relate to guilt and shame associated with eating. If you can get rid of all of that, what would you do with your time? It's an important question because that space and time will be there and you get to fill it. How will you fill it? And it's really important moving forward. A little delay. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So monotony and keeping it simple is extraordinarily helpful. You're eating twice a day. You're eating whole food, plant-based. You watch the scale. That's it. Simple meals. The simpler foods are better. We don't need any of these highly processed foods in our diet. Those are for days of deliciousness, which we'll get to later. But like for the day-to-day, eating simple is good. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get 100% RDI. Keep it simple. Eat whole plants. It really is that simple. And I love this quote. It's in my book from Zig Ziglar. Repetition is the mother of learning, the father of action, which makes it the architect of accomplishment. Everything about food is habit. All of these things we do around food is habit and socialized into us. Try new habits, create these new habits, tiny little habits that you repeat day after day after day. It becomes second nature and you get all of the results and it becomes automatized. And that's the goal, right? Is to not have to think about all this stuff anymore, to feel really comfortable and enjoy your food. I'm not saying any of that, but just getting it into a pattern and new habits, and then it will become equally familiar and enjoyable once you're into that pattern. So the next chapter in the book is execute. It's basically that you eat within a time restricted window, usually twice a day, once or twice a day, whatever you prefer. If you need 3 times a day, that's fine too. Whatever works for you. You eat whole plants and you track the results. If you get on the scale for a couple days, 3-4 days, and it's not budging or it's going up, you're eating too much, course correct. That's it. That's it. There's no secrets here. The secret to weight loss is there's no secrets. And this is just a way to think about it that's very simple, but really accurate. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to be like, you're not broken. You're not broken. So many people come to me, they think they're broken. They're, postmenopausal, or their hormones, or their thyroid must be a problem. But you would know if your thyroid is a problem. That's a simple test, and it's usually not the case. You're not broken. It's almost always the food. It's always the food. Whenever I see a food journal, I know. My client came to me yesterday and she's like, I'm so frustrated and so defeated. I'm like, really? Because I saw your food journal. I knew exactly what was going on. Like you will start to recognize that it's always the food. And that's a good thing because that means you're in the driver's seat and I want to empower you to know that you get to make these decisions. You get to decide your weight. You get to choose your weight. You get to choose your food. You get to choose what's on your plate. We don't get to choose a lot in this world. We don't have control over most things in life, but control what you can control. And your food is one of them. It's quite extraordinarily empowering if you think about it that way. The next chapter is motivate. So I use different tools for motivation. Of course, that's what I do. Like, all of my techniques and everything are in this book. All I offer when I work with clients and when I teach classes is accountability. And that's the only difference. So you could always use your own accountability. So a food journal is incredible because, when you're about to take a bite, you're like, do I really want to write that on my food journal? No, I'm not going to eat that. It's not on my plan. I'm not hungry. That's a great accountability tool. The other thing I use is something called emotional to-do lists. These have been so helpful. And this evolved out of conversations over the last decade with my clients. When you have a plan and you're eating twice a day and you know what you're eating, I know I'm having my Fiesta cauliflower rice, Tex-Mex peppers with nacho cheese sauce after we hang up. I know what my plan is today. If I were to have a bite with my daughter last night of her curry, I would have been eating, why am I eating? So all you need to do is take one moment and when you know yourself, right, which is what this whole thing is about, is finding out, knowing thyself. When you know that, oh, I'm eating this because I'm stressed, usually it's stress. I'm bored. That's a really common one. Sometimes it's sad and feeling out of control. Sometimes it's feeling, like you're celebrating with someone, all of those things. So stop yourself and go, what am I doing? What's going on? Really, what's going on? Because food is not going to solve that problem. Food will solve hunger. It will solve nourishment, but it's not going to solve any of those problems. It just pushes it down. And this is where I get into the nuts and bolts with my clients about what's really going on. But deep dive into it and ask yourself. And if those are the most common ones, so here's what I have my clients do. Before those moments hit, write a list. And I like putting it in my phone, like in the notes section, because you could bring it with you and keep ongoing exhaustive lists of, for stress, it would be things I do that relax me. So for me, it's taking a hot bath or going out into nature for a minute or cuddling with a fuzzy animal or calling my girlfriend or, hugging my daughter or whatever it is for you. Write it down, type it out, have it in front of you so that when it's that moment, when you're about to eat and you're like, you just have to stop yourself. I have my clients set a timer for 1 minute. Just give yourself space. That mindful moment, give yourself time to be mindful and say, what am I doing? Am I hungry? Does the celery stick sound good? No. Okay. What's going on? Stress. Okay. Go into your list and promise yourself you're going to do one of those things on your list first. You could always eat later. And I'm going to go hug my daughter. Boom. Go hug your daughter. Come back down. Am I still hungry? No. It's just a way to give yourself space and a moment of mindfulness before you do something. So that's what I have my clients do. It's so helpful. And then you keep adding to your list. Like if you're walking around going, oh, this is really relaxing, I'm going to add that to my stress list. And then have a separate list for entertainment. When I'm bored, I love to binge watch a show on Netflix or, read a juicy novel or dive into practice I'm studying Spanish on Duolingo, whatever it is, like put those things in a list also so that when you're like, oh, I'm just actually bored, what can I do that will be entertaining? It's really helpful. It sounds a little silly, but again, words are so powerful and having it written is visceral. And if you can create that space and create something to do, give yourself a to do, it will put you in the right direction. And the last little motivational thing that I use with my clients is called sticky notes. Basically, I have them write down the sayings that really motivate them, like don't break the seal or nothing tastes as good as healthy feels. And you put that down. I have my clients, they stick them on their computer or by their fridge or in their car or by their phone, wherever it is. And it's just reminders because again, we just need to keep thinking about it and being present in the moment. And that's one way to keep you present. All right. So you've gone to your goal weight. Hallelujah, you're finally done with weight loss. Now what? Well, now is when the diet actually begins. This is the most crucial time. The reason my subtitle is Lose Weight for the Last Time is because I want to break that roller coaster. This is like right now at that bottom weight, you are a spring stretched out to maximum capacity and your body is brilliant at homeostasis. So it wants to go back. It wants to go back to old habits. It wants to go back to that weight. You need to be so so determined right now. This is the most important point ever of this whole process. Maintenance mode is the most important part. So here's what I do with my clients when we start going into that. I have them go try to stay at that same weight for as many days in a row. So you're going to like get your body. It's kind of like a set point theory type of idea where you're getting your body homeostasis-ized. I know it's not a word, at this new weight. Okay. And then we set boundaries. So I know that I love when I feel the best and my clothes fit best when I'm about 115 to 120 for my weight. So if I get to 123 or maybe 122, I rein it back in. I'm like, okay, a couple of days where I have to be like, I have to rein it in, and that's okay. I just do it for a couple of days. Like those naturally lean people here, we employ that phenomenon again. It's just, you rein it back in and you have a no matter what weight. And it's a boundary. So if you keep getting on the scale, which is another boundary I recommend, because some people say, oh, I ate off plan, like this weekend is a bunch of holidays right now. And so if you eat off plan, it's like, oh, I'll just get on scale on Monday, or I'll just get on scale next week or next month or January. And that's where the problem's happening, because it's like, la, 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 I don't want to look, I don't want to see, I don't want to hear. And that's how you end up just getting back into your old habits. So be accountable to yourself, get on the scale every day and set that boundary, have a no matter what weight. The way I start bringing in maintenance mode with my clients is we bring back more movement, a little bit more exercise. That's going to increase your appetite a little bit. Great. Then you're going to increase your intake a little bit, but you'll see that the more days you're at that weight, the more you can get away with, because your body's used to it. Like most of us know how to maintain. Like I've been around the same weight my entire life, except for my pregnancies. So I'm really good at maintaining. And most of us are, like, even if you're like 30 pounds above where you want to be, you've probably been really easily staying at that 30 pounds. It's not like you gain all the time. Most of us are very good at maintenance. So remember, there's a lot more wiggle room in maintenance mode, but at first you have to be very, very diligent about it. So I bring back movement and activity. I bring back a little bit more variety with the food, because remember, more variety means you want to eat more decisions about food, the more we eat. That's just human nature as well. Another tool for maintenance is a gratitude list. This also evolved out of conversations with my clients. And I interviewed Devon Franklin on my podcast. And one of his things that he did once was put a timer on for 30 seconds and just say out loud everything you're grateful for. So I thought, before I interviewed him, I'm like, I'm going to try this. Why not? So I was sitting there in the morning. I was sitting right back there. And I'm like, I set the timer and I was like, oh, I'm excited that I'm grateful that I get to choose between tea and coffee this morning. I'm grateful for my fuzzy slippers. I'm grateful for blah, blah, blah. And I just started doing it. I just started listing up silly things, big things. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my kids, whatever, serious, little, tiny. And I realized that after that timer stopped, the gratitude kept going. I kept thinking about all that stuff. So my clients that have had extraordinarily, amazing results throughout and awarenesses and epiphanies and ideas and like new things that they haven't done in a long time, sometimes decades, write it down. Again, words are powerful, so powerful. So I have them keep a list of gratitude, things they're grateful for. It's a really great thing. Why not? Gratitude is something we don't focus enough on, and we focus on what we focus on. So if you make yourself focus on things that you want to focus on, it's creating barriers and boundaries and space in your brain for that. It's going to allocate that real estate in your brain for focusing on those things. So why not focus on gratitude, and you'll be more grateful in the world. And the last thing about maintenance is days of deliciousness. So I don't like to call anything cheat days, because first of all, I want you to love your food. Like, don't eat food you don't love. You don't have to live on carrot sticks. Like, that's just boring. You need to enjoy your food. And there are so many things you can enjoy eating this way. You don't need a cheat day. You're only cheating yourself, right? That whole old statement. But basically, a day of deliciousness is perhaps a day you want to be a little bit more decadent. So if it's a holiday, or if it's your birthday, if you're going to be with your daughter you haven't been with in a long time, or whatever it is, like it's something special, then plan it and then enjoy every single bite of it. No guilt or shame or anything. You're just going to enjoy it, knowing that right after that, you're going to get back on plan. There is wiggle room. There is room for this in your life. We have to live. We are human. Life is short, and we have to enjoy our life, and food is part of that. But I want you to enjoy all your food. And then some days you have a day of deliciousness. And so here's what that looks like. Oh, here's my beautiful daughter who I've been talking about all day long. Hello, honey. Happy spring break. Are you leaving? I love you. I put him over there. Say hello. Happy spring break. I love you. Drive safe. Okay, so here are all of the foods that you can eat deliciously. I mean, just an example of it. I have a list somewhere. Let me see if I can pull up my list. Okay, let's see if I can find my list of foods. It's so fun to think about it like this. I said it last time. Okay, so here we go. On a plant-based diet, there's no limit, right? You could eat pots, pans, plates, power bowls. Those are the chapters in this book. And then soup, salad, sides, and sweets, the chapters of my last book. Stews, stir fries, stacks, scrambles, skewers, sushi, sauces, sautés, sheet pan, slaws, steaks, stuffed veggies, chilies, chowders, casseroles, curries, lasagna, loaded potatoes, loaves, pastas, panini, paellas, pancakes, pilafs, pizza, polenta, pestos, puddings, pot stickers, purees, bisques, bakes, barbecue, biryani, burritos, burgers, hummus, dips, dressings, wraps, rolls, ramen, risottos, roasts, tacos, tostadas, toast, tofu, tempeh, trail mix, tarts, tagine, dumplings, fajitas, masalas, kebabs, quiches, wings, ratatouilles, and so much more. What would you add to that list? There's so much deliciousness on a plant-based diet. And I mean, during the weight loss phase and during maintenance phase and forever on out on a plant-based diet, it is full of delicious options. The notable nutrients once you're in maintenance mode. I also have my clients take a multivitamin. I didn't mention that. It's really important. Just take a multivitamin, cover your micronutrient basis. Even always, all my clients, I take a multivitamin that have these nutrients. No diet is perfect. All diets require consideration and consciousness, right? If you're on a standard Western diet, you're not getting folate and fiber and vitamin C adequately. And on a plant-based diet, you need to be mindful of B12, D, K2, iodine, and zinc, and maybe the DHA and EPA, which you can get from the, walnuts, chia, hemp seed, flax seeds, and tofu, or you can consider taking a long chain microalgae formula of EPA and DHA if you want to. But this is important to be mindful of this. You're not going to have a protein deficiency eating a whole food plant-based diet, especially even if you're limiting it during a weight loss phase for a little bit of time, you're still not going to go into deficiency. But these are nutrients we all need to be mindful of on a plant-based diet. Here's another thing. I have this on my website. Again, plantbaseddietitian.com. This is all there so you can kind of look at it if it helps you to see. My daughter's my garage is right there. So this is just kind of a way to look. You want to think about, where do I get my, especially when people ask you, where do you get your fiber? Where do you get your calcium? Where do you get your iodine? This is just a nice chart to kind of show all of those different things. And then remember this part, radical self-compassion. We are human after all. So make sure that you stay, if you go off plan, that's okay. We are human. Sometimes you need to do that. I love this quote from the Daily Calm. Sometimes you need to step off the worn path, lay down with your eyes up to the blue sky, interlock your fingers behind your head, and let the grace grow up around you. Be graceful to yourself. We give ourselves so much of a hard time for so many things, especially our food, that remember that we are human and we are adapted to survive. And anytime we've got delicious, hyper palatable, high caloric food right in front of us, we're going to want to eat it because that will help us survive and stay alive. So be radically self-compassionate and just get back on path. You didn't undo it. One meal or one off-plan day is not going to ruin all of the hard work that you've put into this. It's not going to undo itself. So radical self-compassion is an element I constantly remind my clients about. I have to constantly remind myself about it. And I'll remind you here today. We are humans after all. I want to end on this. This is the dedication to my book, and this is where it all begins for me. The Choose You Now Diet is dedicated to our magnificent bodies, our bodies that keep our hearts beating, our lungs filling with air, our hormones flowing as needed, our circadian clocks intimately tied to daily, monthly, and seasonal patterns without any conscious work on our parts. Our bodies that walk us through life and enable us to smell roses, feel rain, bond with an animal, watch a sunset, and experience love, pain, joy, heartbreak, excitement, disappointment, successes, failures, wins, losses, and passions. These same extraordinary homes we live in from birth until death, who know how to fight off microbes and inflammation and stress, who tap into our fat storage when we run low in glycogen. and who hold on to fat in order to survive in times of scarcity. You just need to let your naturally brilliant, beautiful bodies do what it is programmed to do. Step out of its way and experience gratitude and love for your inner wisdom. Nourish your body and your mind. You already know what you need to do. Long-term behavioral change and weight management require determination and persistence. You have to want to achieve and maintain your goals no matter what. And you can do just that because everything about food is habit. So set your plan, remember your why, and stay the course. Everything happens in this moment, and this one, and this one, and this one as well. You have the opportunity to choose every single time based on whether this decision is on plan, whether it serves you in this moment, and whatever the implications may be, choose to stay on plan. Choose to pursue your why. Tomorrow, next week, next month, next year will arrive no matter what. Where do you want to be at those points in time? Imagine it and then choose it. You get to decide. You get to choose you now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Julieanna, for that. That was great. You sure that was your first time doing this for this presentation?
Yes, thank you.
That was really, really good, really good. All right. So before we get into Q&A, I just want everyone to know where can people follow up with you and find all your books? What's the best way to do that?
Thank you. It is at plantbaseddietitian.com. All my books are on Amazon and you can reach me there. Yep, plantbaseddietitian.com. You can find me on social media. All of my links are all there. And I encourage you, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear and talk to you and answer your questions. If we don't get them today, I'm always happy to talk to you via social media or my website. Great.
Thanks for that. So we'll hop into the Q&A session for our presentation. So I'm just going to explain to everyone how we do this here at Nutritional Health. So we normally don't take questions from the chat menu. Instead, we ask everyone to virtually raise their hand from the reactions tab at the bottom of your Zoom window. You'll see a raised hand icon in that prompt. Just click that, and then we'll see you in our participants window where we can call on you. We will then take questions in the order which you receive them. When it's your turn, we'll unmute you and prompt you to ask your question. And with that, Julieanna, are you ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, great. So I see a few hands already. All right, first one is Thomas. Thomas, what's your question?
Well, thank you very much for taking my call. Julian, I can tell you there's no book that I have ever seen written like yours. It is fantastic, and that's the next thing I'm going to do is buy the book. One I've noticed, I was able to lose 130 pounds in about 6 months. And I noticed in your book, you have the maintenance section, and I fell victim to that. I had some kind of a phobia that, I got to make sure I keep my nutrient base up. And I gained 130 pounds back. Secondly, this is part of my question. I just lost an aunt, and she was 60 pounds. But the most amazing thing to me, she used to eat plant-based. And she had in her neck, she had a mechanism where she could not swallow, and the food would go down her trachea. What was most amazing to me was the little food that she ate. She lasted well over a year. It surprised me how little food we can eat. She had no amyloid plaque in her brain. She was sharp as a tack. But then it got to the point where she couldn't walk, and then she died at 60 pounds. So basically, my question is, we really don't need a lot of food to keep us in survival mode. And my phobia was, I'm going to get sick from malnutrition. Have you seen this in your practice? Thank you very much for taking my question.
Thank you, Thomas, for asking, and I'm sorry for your loss. And that is a lot of wisdom there. And that is my life, is dealing with nutrient deficiency fear. That is everything I was taught. Was like, we live in a paradigm of avoiding nutrition deficiency. That's what I'm taught in grad school. I sat in on my ex-husband's medical school class on nutrition. And it was It was goiter, iodine deficiency, rickets, D deficiency. Okay, let's move on to the next subject. That was all nutrition is. And in grad school, it's like, how do you avoid this, this, and this? That's why I make those charts of where to get these nutrients. And that's why I was scared away from it, because everyone talks about that, about this fear of deficiency. But look at what's happening. We are not mostly having deficiency in this world. People are dying every day from cardiovascular disease, from type 2 diabetes. These are food-borne illnesses. This is from overconsumption, not underconsumption. I don't see deficiencies very often. Yes, B12, because that's a problem with a vegan diet. Yes, D, because some people are, we have all these things about D. And I talk about all of those extensively. I don't need to go there now. You're not, do your due diligence. You get your blood work drawn. You keep, that's like, again, data, collect data. If your scale is maintaining, you're not in a deficit of calorie, right? And if your scale is going up, then you're eating too much. And if the scale is going down, then you're eating enough to go into that. But the micronutrients are something you need to be mindful of. That's why I recommend taking a multivitamin. Maybe that will bring you some peace, Thomas. It brings me peace. And I have my clients do it because I don't want anyone to be deficient. But the peace of mind of just having a covering your micronutrient bases and then checking everything else. And then the other thing I have people look at is, how do you feel? How do you feel when how are your workouts? How is your energy? Are you getting sick more often? These are things to indicate. These are indicators of not doing well, right? And then you will know. And so just collect data, go to the doctor. Don't be afraid of getting lab works drawn like every year, unless there's something more important that you need to be more frequent about. But gather data and take a multivitamin, and know that there's way more obsession about nutrient deficiency than need be. And if you're mindful about it and you're eating whole plants and you're eating like this, you're focusing on those 6 daily threes and substantiating with whole grains and all the other stuff, you're not going to have a problem. We just don't see that very frequently. It's very, very rare. If you're getting enough calorie to keep your weight, if you're in maintenance mode, then you're getting enough, and just take the multi to cover those other nutrients. But it's a very good question. And everyone's concerned about it. You're not alone. I could tell you that.
Okay, thank you, Julieanna, for that. Next, we have Mary. Mary, what's your question?
Hi, thank you so much. You are beautiful. I have 3 questions. One is that I've had people tell me that I should not eat oats, soy, or garbanzo beans. And I think it's because of glyphosate, even if I get organic, they're saying there's no way to get it that's healthy. So that, again, would have to do with eating hummus. My second question is, when you listed the 6 categories, you did not include grains. And I love oats. And is that because you were listing it for weight loss? And maybe you can have the grains after. And then the last one is, how can we influence the medical field to start teaching nutrition more to definitely doctors? Sounds like they are not trained very much. And I don't know about becoming a nutritionist. I would think that plant-based would be taught there, but I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for your compliments, and thank you for your great questions. I will answer the first 2 kind of together. Well, no, I'll go first. There's a lot. We live in a world of toxicity, right? We've got like toxins in our air, in our water, in our food, there's arsenic in our rice, and there's pollutants in our everything. There's stuff everywhere, glyphosate, whatever, all the stuff, all the things. It's a bucket. I put it in that bucket category. Like, how much, what are you filling your bucket with? There's all this stuff, and stuff is going to have to spill over. So you do your best, right? And the way I do that, and personally, and what I recommend to my clients, is I buy from different sources. Like, I don't always buy the same brand. I don't always buy from the same store. I just kind of mix it up a little bit, but I don't avoid certain foods, especially those foods that are super healthy, oats and chickpeas. Oh my gosh, we're not going to give up hummus for that. And you could try to get organic. Anyway, I just think it's something you don't need to worry about. Most people are sick from eating animal products and processed foods. That's where I see the people that come to me with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, all the list of the common things, are dealing with they're eating a standard Western diet. If you're eating a whole food plant-based diet and you're prioritizing the 6 daily threes and you're taking a multivitamin, you're doing everything you can. And then mix it up a little bit. So like maybe some days you have chickpeas, and sometimes you have kidney beans, and sometimes you have black beans. You just mix it up. The variety will give you a little bit more, because remember, with toxicity, the dose makes the poison. That's really important thing to remember. And if you get overwhelmed with this and you're aiming for perfection, how are you ever going to have peace in this way of eating, or in any way of eating? So I would say, I don't recommend any of that, like avoiding those foods for that purpose. I just say have some variety, and know that if you're avoiding concentrated toxins like in animal products, and avoiding things like refined sugars and all those things that we know, we have an abundance of literature, are harmful, and you're eating whole plants, you're really doing way better than most of the world in terms of your reduction of risk for chronic disease. The second question, whole grains, thank you for pointing that out. And everyone asked me that. I have a video. You guys, if you want my video on the naturally lean people, I'm naturally lean habits of naturally lean people. If you want my video on why whole grains is not part of the 6 daily threes, either email me or look for me I'm on YouTube, Instagram, all of YouTube. You could easily search for it. You could just put my name in and put in naturally lean, or put in whole grains, because I answered this question in depth. But briefly speaking, there is nothing not fabulous about whole grains. In fact, there's a huge amount of literature that they are healthy, disease preventing, health promoting, nutritious, all that. The reason they're not in the 6 daily threes is because there is nothing unique in whole grains that you can't get from those other categories. So prioritize those 6 daily threes, and then substantiate with whole grains, with more servings of those things. Basically, it's great for culinarily speaking, for satiety. Whole grains are fabulous. Some people have problems during the weight loss process with like certain whole grains. I know rice, for a lot of people, it's constipating, for instance. So mix it up and see. Again, you're going to be your own detective. You're going to get your PhD in your body losing weight. Many people do great with whole grains. There is nothing wrong with whole grains. I love whole grains. I eat them all the time. I recommend them. There's just nothing in there that you can't get from the other 6 daily threes. So that's why they're not part of that. So in terms of teaching doctors, when I first started doing this work 17 years ago, and I would go to these conferences and speak to like a small group of doctors. The last one I went to before COVID, there was like 1,200 doctors in the audience. It's happening. So many of my friends are physicians. I am in this world, and it's happening. It's growing like never before. It's slow. And like the doctor in Mexico that told my dad food doesn't matter, they're everywhere too, and they're still dominant, but it's changing, and the education is hopefully changing. There's a lot of people working on that, and I think it's a really exciting time. Things are changing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mary, for that. Next, we have Paula. Paula, what is your question?
Hi, I was wondering, does the plant-based diet correct stubborn insulin resistance? And if it's so, how long would you expect a person to start being able to lose weight if you have stubborn insulin resistance?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is the only diet that's ever reversed type 2 diabetes, which is basically an advanced form of insulin resistance. So absolutely, it helps. And like I said before, I have my clients alert their physicians if they're on hyperglycemic medications, because it could happen that quickly. It could happen within days, if not a day. Like sometimes it's so quick that you have to be really careful because you don't want to become hypoglycemic. So insulin resistance is, basically from eating saturated fat and from eating refined sugars and all the Western diet standard that people are consuming. When you switch to whole plants and have all that fiber, and of course, exercise is really important for insulin sensitivity as well. But the diet itself will change that, and it happens very, very quickly. So can't recommend it highly enough.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paula. Next, we have Alejandro. Alejandro, what's your question? Alejandro?
Hello?
There? Yep, we hear you.
Hi, Julieanna. Thank you for your presentation, and thanks for all your enthusiasm and optimism. I really appreciate it. My question to you is, how important is breathing before you start eating to get your body in the right state for digestion?
Oh, interesting question. I don't know if there's a scientific study that I've read about that. I know that breathing is important, and the breath is the one connection between our mind and body. So I have a mindful meditation. You guys, if you want this meditation too, email me or look on my podcast. It's also on YouTube. It's a mindful meditation for eating. And it's about setting the stage for a really calm and mindful eating event. And we don't do this often enough. And so I have it where it's like, you're taking deep breaths and you're sitting there and you're looking at your food and you're taking in the beauty of the food and you're smelling the food and you're trying to engage all of your senses. So how long does it, maybe if you're more well-seasoned in practice and you've been doing meditation for years, maybe you only need one breath. Maybe you need a few breaths. Maybe you're like in a crazy, frantic environment and you need more time to calm down. Maybe you have had a very calm day and you're just ready to sit and eat your meal. So that's a very good question. I think it's I would guess, again, I haven't seen a study on this. I'm guessing that it depends on where you are right now and your experience, but anyone that takes a breath or two before eating and really appreciates and tastes their food. How often do we sit down and actually taste our food and chew our food, right? Not often enough. And so that's what that meditation is about. It's about really enjoying the food. And the more mindful we are about all of this process, the more empowered we are. So I love your question because I think it's important to think about taking a breath or two before sitting down for a meal, and always throughout the day, taking a breath or two. There's never enough times to remind yourself to come back to being mindful again. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Julieanna.
All right, thanks, Alejandro. And next we have Andrew. Andrew, what is your question?
Hi, Julieanna. Great presentation as always. With regards to food sensitivities, food allergies, things like that, what symptoms should we be looking for? For instance, like if someone can eat food to abundance and really the only symptom they have is some extra gas, does that mean that they should be avoiding a food? Does it mean that you should do like a biomarker test? Does that raise inflammation if they have extra gas? Because you hear so much about avoid this food, avoid that, everybody stay off gluten. But if the only symptom somebody has is gas, does that mean that food is a problem, or is it you have to look into it deeper? Thank you.
So nice to see you here, Andrew. Thank you for that great question. I love that question. And, that's such people get so caught up in this. And I grew up with a father who was deathly allergic to nuts, like anaphylaxis allergic to nuts. And that was rare at the time. You didn't really hear about this. So we would go to restaurants and we would always be like, my mom would be like, no, really, he will die if he has a nut. Like, it's like such a big deal. Even if like it gets in his tongue, he could die. And it was a big deal to have an allergy. And that has evolved and in so many ways over the last 40 years or whatever, since I've watched it. And, now people are allergic to all sorts of things and avoiding things for all sorts of reasons, especially gluten. You mentioned gluten, big one. I wrote a whole book on that, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Gluten-Free Vegan Cooking, because there's so much misinformation about gluten, as if gluten is some kind of poison, but really it's just like some protein in most foods that are wheat or rye or oats or barley, but not most people are fine with it. So I would say if you're not allergic, like my father, where you will have an anaphylactic response to something or anything tolerance wise, like some people, my sister has asthma and we know certain things. In fact, we had this conversation last night, me and my sister, she's like, oh yeah, I was trying to move around this, whatever it was, like gluten on this thing. But I had a little bit. And so I had my inhaler last night. So I think to a certain extent, it gets down to tolerance. How much can you tolerate? If you're having a little gas, but you really want to have that bowl of pasta, is it worth it? That's your decision. If you're going to have an anaphylactic experience or an asthma attack, that's a different story. So how much can you tolerate and how safe are you? Like first is safety, right? So I would never tell someone that's allergic to nuts in that way, or allergic to my dad's nuts, or allergic to nuts. He's not nuts, or allergic to dairy or whatever it is. Dairy, most people are. I've developed an allergy to dairy from just not having it for so many years. And when I accidentally have it, I have an asthma attack, which is crazy. Our bodies are so fascinating. The immune response, everything is so fascinating. So it depends on tolerance when it comes to something as simple as gas. If it's something that's like perpetual and painful, and there's all sorts of things that can come up. People get, eczema, and they get all sorts of things, allergies, breakouts. What can you tolerate and what's dangerous? So I would say it's up to you to some extent. And those other things that are like anaphylaxis or asthma would be serious, and you would want to avoid that at all costs. But if it's something as minor as gas and it's really worth it for you to have whatever said thing is, do it. It's up to you. You get to decide. So I would say choose you now, even when it comes to intolerances. And the way to figure those out, by the way, let me add one more thing to that. When someone comes to me and they're having all these weird symptoms, mix and match what I just said. And I say, okay, so what causes it? You never really, it's the hardest thing is to figure it out. I don't think those scratch tests are very accurate. The blood tests are not very accurate. Sometimes you'll just see exactly what you ate the most of will show up as the things you're most intolerant of. The most effective way is to do an elimination diet. I've walked people through it. It's kind of hellacious and difficult because you have to cut out everything and have 2 foods and then build upon that. Another way to do it, the first step I do with my clients is a very detailed food and symptom journal. So you keep a food journal. I do date, time, what you ate. And then when you have a symptom, whether it's a breakout or an asthma attack or whatever it is, you write it down. And then you start to look for patterns. And like over weeks, it's very tedious and it takes a long time, but that's like a really accurate way of figuring out what you may be intolerant to. And then you start cutting those things out and seeing if overall your symptoms improve. But it's a matter of, it's very tedious. You have to be like your own detective again to determine what those are. And, but sometimes it's worth it. If you're suffering, it's definitely worth it.
And how long do you typically eliminate a food for before you can try to introduce it?
Right. Well, if you know that it's something that you're intolerant to, I would give it, sometimes it takes a few months. You know, we are in the infancy of understanding immunology. And I think these things are changing all the time. We're learning all these connections with the microbiome. So it's a little bit up in the air. So some people say some things and some people say other things. Again, I think there's some inter-individual variability here, depending on your microbiome and all that. So I would say go as long as you can. And then if you want to try to bring it back, maybe like, I don't know, a couple of weeks and see, sometimes months. And if you do it a couple of weeks and you still have the symptom, then maybe wait a few months and try it again. You could do it like that, but there is no perfect clear-cut way to do this. It's one of those, like, you just have to kind of play it out and see how it works for you. Unfortunately.
Great. Thanks for the detailed response and congrats on the new book. Bye.
Thank you, Andrew. Nice to see you.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Great question. Next, we have Joan. Joan, what is your question? Joan, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Julieanna, for the wonderful presentation. I've always led quite a healthy life till about 20 years ago when work circumstances and being on call and crazy shifts kind of took over my life, and I gained a fair bit of weight and I became pre-diabetic. And about 3 years ago, I realized I had to make some changes, and I saw very slow results until about a year ago when I went plant-based, and then it was quite miraculous. I've lost 60 pounds in the last year. My lipid profile, my A1C, my blood pressure, everything's great. I'll be 73 next month, and I'm not on any medications. I feel fabulous. I'm active. I'm biking at least 100 kilometers a week. My problem is I have to find new younger friends because none of my friends can keep up to me, and I have trouble not being judgmental when I'm with them and they're talking about their aches and their pains and their pills they're on, and I want to preach to them because they don't have to live that life. They can change it, but I just have to bite my tongue and thank you for that information, because you can't change someone. They have to change themselves, and they have to have the desire. I just wish they could all feel as good as I do. And thank you so much for all the information.
Oh, Joan, congratulations. And I'm so happy for you. And that is such a good problem to have, right? That you need younger friends. But yeah, you're a lighthouse, and you are. I mean, I just heard you for a minute, and you're a lighthouse, and they are seeing it. And if they want it, they will ask you. But yeah, find people that are on like-minded so you can have more of that stuff in your life, but also just be a lighthouse and keep up the amazing work, and congratulations. And that's what I love. Results are typical. Like, you just did this and look what happened. It's amazing. So you're a testament. Exactly. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And my doctor now asked me for advice.
Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, I wanted to say that exactly. I wanted to say that back then. That's another way that a lot of doctors are moving in this direction, is that they send their patients home with medications. They see that their patients actually do this instead. And then their patients are teaching the doctors, and they're like, oh, wait a second, what? And the doctors that are really like ready for this information are like on the path, and they're the ones that are now studying it and like learning it themselves. So yes, bring it to your doctors. This is all good. This is how we're making this a revolution take place.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Joan. Next, we have Joe. Joe, what is your question?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. I just want to say kind of like Joan. I'm younger than her. I'm 65. I'm going to turn 65 next week. And
When?
Excuse me?
When? My birthday's Monday. When's yours?
Oh, when's the 19th? Tuesday. Okay, you're the 18th.
Happy birthday. Birthday
Thank you.
twins
Happy
almost.
birthday to you too.
Thank you.
I don't want to ask you how old you're going to be. That's not right. I know, but I'll be 65.
I'm going to be 80.
Excuse me?
I'm going to be 80. I'm just kidding.
So
sorry, go on.
I've been whole food, plant-based, I want to say close to 35 years. And I don't want to boast, but I have mastered it pretty well. I've taken it to the next level. I grow my own food. I could blindfold myself and make sauces, and my wife will melt when she eats them. She says, "You're incredible with the sauces." So I got that down. I'm learning how to make really high quality compost so my food tastes even better that I grow. So I'm working on flavor. So that's like the next level, I think, when you get into growing for flavor, right? So my question is, I unfortunately had a divorce some years back. My kids had to live in 2 households. My ex-wife at the time wasn't respectful or observed a lot of the things I was about. And my kids were conflicted, and I kind of didn't force it down their throats. And I got to a point where I just had to be an example to them, and I had to give them the meat that they wanted that she hooked them on, but I did keep it as clean as I could when they were here. My question is, now they're in their late 20s. One of them hit 30. They're in impeccable health. They skew towards my lifestyle and what I'm doing, but they haven't completely embraced a plant-based lifestyle. And they're both like sculpted bodies, and they're in the exercise world, and they're incredibly successful. One of them worked for the Boston Red Sox as a trainer. I mean, they're really smart. So what I'm getting to is that I'm just concerned, at what point do you, from your observation, do you see people in their 20s who are sort of mindful about plant-based but haven't made the switch completely? What's on the runway for them in terms of problems, and around what age have you seen that?
Okay, we're like soul siblings over here. I had the same thing in my divorce, and I can empathize with you. And my kids are still younger, but it's horribly painful to watch, right? And like I said before, and by the way, first of all, congratulations, well done. Like, I love what you just said, and I think it's so laudable that you've been doing this for so long, and it's just wonderful. And you are that lighthouse. You are that shining beacon to your children. No matter what you do, I don't see it at a certain age. It depends on, like, something has to happen, some awareness, a documentary, an illness, watching someone close to you have either a really good thing happen because of their diet or a really bad thing happen because of their diet. It has to come from within, no matter what. I've seen it at every age. I know kids that are doing this, and I know adults that are doing this at every single age, like you've even heard just now. So I don't have an answer for you, because it depends. It depends on a million things. It's painful to watch. That was the first thing that happened when I moved out of my house, is that my ex brought in the cheese pizza and the junk food. I was like, it killed me, because that was my life, was keeping my kids on this path. I mean, my son had accidentally had 2 bites of meat accidentally in camp one time and with a friend one time, until I left the house. And it's like, it's so painful to watch when it's your children, especially. It was hard for me to watch my dad have a stroke and go back to eating the same way, and knowing that he's like, God knows how long he'll be here. It's like, it's so crazy to me that you could see this, and you know what it can do. You know how powerful food is. and you can't make them eat. You can lead a human to healthy, but you can't make them eat. So keep on keeping on and being your extraordinary light that you are, and just hope that they will want to go in that direction. I think it's really hopeful that they've already gone in most of that direction, because also they don't have to be perfect. Remember that it's like the majority. What do you do overall? What is the preponderance of their diet? If they're eating animal products here and there, they're just whatever, they're still doing better than most people that are eating. Remember that some people are eating fast food 2 or 3 times a day. So compared to what is also an important question to remind yourself of. But also, the less we preach, I think the more effective it is. I've learned that lesson the hard way too, is just be, I don't know, you just have to be the lighthouse, not the tugboat.
Yeah, they do. They really love and admire me now. And the good news is that turnaround happened right around when they hit their 20s. So, the good news for you is that your kids, when they hit their 20s, I'm going to project, are going to look at you as, their main source of inspiration and guidance.
Yeah, I hope so. It started with my daughter a little bit already. So yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thank you too.
Thanks, Joe. Next, we have Crystal. Crystal, what is your question?
Hello, Juliana. First of all, happy birthday to you. It's ironic because today I'm actually celebrating my father's birthday. He's turning 90. And
happy birthday.
Yes, thank you. And he is on no medication. But I've been talking to him about eliminating the meat, but he is a creature of habit, but he's, gradually working toward that. I'm plant-based maybe since 2018, and then off and on through my whole life have been kind of a little bit vegetarian, vegan, but I also did the protein power plan. Remember that diet? But anyway, my question to you has to do specifically with weight gain. So for me, because I'm taking care of my dad, I get these stressful moments, and then I will pig out at night on nuts. And so I've been gaining. And I will say this, when I went plant-based back in 2018 and I had all my blood work done, I had some extensive work done where I could look at my lipid levels, my levels of omega-3, omega-6, the ALA, the whole 9 yards, just through a company called Boston Heart. But anyway, my cholesterol and everything went down. My cholesterol went down. Let me rephrase that. My cholesterol went down, but my omega-3s and 6s were very much depleted. But anyway, about a year later, my cholesterol went up, but I wasn't eating meat. So I was wondering if that came from the nuts, because I do know nuts have some saturated fat, and I might have been doing coconut oil back then. I can't remember. I'm not doing it now, but I was. So I don't know if that could have raised my cholesterol levels. So I'm more concerned about trying to get my cholesterol levels down and my omegas up and lose weight. So I definitely want to look at your program.
Great. Yes. So I would say a few things. First of all, yes, I've done this with clients that were already really lean, and we couldn't figure out why the cholesterol wasn't going down, and too many nuts. So keep it to 1 to 2 ounces, measure it out and put the way. And you have to remember, everything about food is habit. Everything. So if you have your meal plan, look at the book, but have your meal plan. I'm going to eat at this time and this time. And there's no other thing. So if you're stressed about dealing with your father, whatever it is, you have your list of what can I do that's relaxing. Immediately go to the thing that's relaxing and do that first, do that activity first. So you're basically you're shifting your thing. You're dealing with the actual issue of stress rather than trying to push that down with food. So it's just going to be, again, everything about food is habit. You're going to have to just kind of get used to it. You're not going to have nuts because that's not on your plan at this time of day. You measure out the 1 to 2 ounces of nuts and seeds for the whole day. You incorporate them in a dressing or a sauce, and you limit them to, maybe you go to 1 ounce for now. And then in terms of your omega-3 fats, I recommend a microalgae supplement. Take if you're not having oil, which I don't recommend oil, because oils by themselves will raise the omega-6 levels in your blood, because there's tons of omega-6 in oils and any kind of processed foods. And that throws off the ratio, because then the omega-3s, and you're going to have less omega-3s. And we want to have about a 1 to 4 ratio. We end up now, Americans have about 1 to 18, 1 to 20 ratio. So cut out oils completely. And you can supplement with a microalgae pill. You could take like a DHA and EPA supplement, and then you don't have to worry about any of that. So you don't have to worry about getting enough omega-6. You'll get that plenty in a plant food.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Just let me say this, you are so beautiful on the inside and as well as on the outside. And your passion for what you do really rings volumes. I mean, you can really see it, that you are truly living what you believe and, what your passion is. So God bless you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. God bless you too. And happy birthday to your dad.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Nancy. I'm a techie with John, along with John, and he's doing some tech work right now. So I'm going to ask the next question. What is it about animal protein that can increase the risk of cancer?
Oh, animal protein raises in our body. It's got an essential amino acid profile. The protein profile basically it makes our body increase our IGF-1 and our growth hormone. So these are hormones that when they're high in our body, we're at an increased risk for cancer growth. It just makes cancer cells grow. We're all exposed to cancer cells every day. Like cancer cells come and go into our bodies. And so if we have a lot of those hormones in our bloodstream, we are more likely we have an increased risk for cancer. That's the basic mechanism of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question would be, how do dairy products like milk, yogurt, and cheese affect our health?
That's number one. The first thing I recommend for everyone to cut out is dairy. If you want to do one thing that will make your health better and improve your nutrition and reduce inflammation across the board, it's to completely eliminate dairy. It is the most inflammatory thing. I mean, it's just incredible what it does. And I've seen so many things now. I know this anecdote, but the research supports it as well. Dairy, by the way, increases risk for type 1 diabetes if you're having it when you're younger. It increases, asthma risk and allergy risk and all those things. And it also, it's got hormones in it. So it's hormonally active. So it increases your risk again to increase your IGF-1 and growth hormone and then increase your risk for cancer. So the number one thing you could do for your overall health is to get rid of dairy. And by the way, there's never been a better time than now to do so, because anything dairy now, they have plant-based versions of it. So there's a wall of plant milks wherever you go. If you go to the coffee shop, if you go to the restaurants, almost everyone has a dairy alternative for your coffee or whatever. There's, dairy-free everything, cheeses and yogurts and ice creams. Not that I'm recommending ice cream or any of that stuff, but you can do anything dairy-free now better than ever. So it's really the one best thing you could do for your health.
Mm-hmm. Is there any recommendations on the type of cheese that you find favorable as far as taste, as well as maybe ice cream that you could recommend to anybody to try?
Because I really recommend eating whole plant food. So if you like something, you're having it in your day of deliciousness, and it could fit into the overall diet. But I don't want to recommend products like that, and I don't even actually know, because I don't really eat those very often at all. I don't even know what's on the market right now. Okay. There's a lot of options though.
Okay, great. What is wrong with eating fish?
What is wrong with eating fish? Well, fish accumulates toxins in the ocean. And so you can go straight to getting those omega-3s from the direct source, from the microalgae, which is where the fish gets them, and avoid all of those pollutants in the diet. I think that's the last question, because I have to run. But thank you so much for all of your amazing questions. And thank you so much for having me here today.
Thanks. Yep, thanks, Julieanna. And also, I just don't want to thank you. I think all of our audience wants to thank you. So I'm going to mute everyone. Everyone, you have to say for Julieanna.
Delivering the best service, and will assist you momentarily.